Hello. Hi, good afternoon. Nervous to be here, actually, but I'm really glad to be here as well, because I would love to share some of the ideas that we have to really help to serve the next billion user that largely is going to come out of Asia. How do we better serve this billion user over the next 5 to 10 years? I come from a little place called Singapore. I wish I could bring Singapore here and show it to you. It's a gorgeous place. But what I like to do, we have been vectorizing the whole country. It's a small country, so we can vectorize it. So one of the game company actually has taken it and actually make it into a 3D game, 3D stereoscopic, 3D sound, actually. So what I like to do is really show you a view of what Singapore looks like, a mirror image of what it looks like. This is what a Formula One racer would see actually while driving in the street of Singapore. For some of you who have known, we actually had the first night race around the street of Singapore a couple of years ago. These are all real mirror images of Singapore, except for the trees. We have prettier trees in Singapore. And the boats are also add-on. But this is really the city view, downtown Singapore. And you will find that the racers are racing against the traffic. That's what the Formula One guys are doing, actually, when they turn the streets into a circuit. This is a new downtown that we are building up. In fact, Universal Studios just created a theme park just out there, across the island. So the boat comes extra. Well, we love to be where we are in our geography positioning, and it's a lovely place to be in. Well, most of you know, just a flight across US, we can access to half the population in the world. In today's context, in today's conversation, we are particularly excited about being in where we are, simply because I think the next billion of users are largely going to come from this part of the world. The internet has been going crazy. I mean, it's going at 500% per year. But what we're going to see, potentially, maybe a billion more users coming in from the mobile devices. This might seem a bit shocking in a pre-iPhone and iPad, maybe. But increasingly, we understand this, right? Getting access, most of the people are outdoor. How do you get access to data? And I think this is one of the main access. Pay TV, turning TV into access, could be also a possibility of high growth in Asia. And that's why we're excited. We are right in the middle of this tremendous growth, bringing the next billion onto the internet. Well, to think of Asia as a homogeneous place, that would be a very far stretch. There are different sensibilities in the sense that we acquire, we respond to all kinds of influences, whether it's social, political, cultural, or languages. Just talking about languages, right? Asia is about 50 countries. And just imagine, in many of the countries, they speak more than 100. Well, I understand the gentleman around who went to 50 states, you might have heard about 40 languages as well, but anyway. we speak, Indonesia, I mean, I was told that they speak 600 languages. So beyond the different sensibilities in Asia, we have to deal with amazingly distinctive business models are evolving very quickly. One of the most stark examples is this. The consumption pattern is evolving very differently. If you look at US, right? The largest transaction is on retail, online retailing, followed by advertisement, and very marginal virtual goods. But look at just China. It's almost the reverse. The virtual economy drives the internet. And in fact, online transaction or online retailing is actually a very small portion. So it's actually the reverse part of the situation. We think that the Asia virtual economy is some 25 times larger than US, and obviously it's the reverse for online advertisement as well as online transaction. Another thing that's happening is really very quickly. Asia seems to be molding, reforming various business models into what it might be suitable for its own economic development today. Well, a simple question. What is the most lucrative, SNS, social network sites, right? Well, the answer is not Facebook. Well, it's actually a little site. which is actually listed in the US. It's actually called Tencent. It has 500 million active users, 500 million. And it's very profitable, actual profit. So how does it do it? Well, it uses messaging, texting, as a way to attract uses virtual goods gaming to really make money, and it uses social media to stick on the user to create stickiness. So it combines all this model into one, and today it's probably the largest online social media sites in the world. 500 million, very profitable. So what's the point here? The challenge is really that this is just the beginning. The net is evolving to meet the need of the user in Asia, of the developing country. So we feel quite strongly that the next billion of users will require the net to be evolved even further. What are we looking at? So one example, right? In Asia, for those of us from Asia, we understand the power of informal networks, right? In here, maybe when you have to go out home, you might employ a nanny, for the night. Well, in Asia, we just pass it to the neighbor. Well, that's some form of bartering, right? There's tremendous amount of informal networks that prevail. So if the net is going to be useful to this next billion, it has to be encompassed. It has to embrace this set of social networks, for example, this informal set of social networks. It can range from, when we talk about transportation, we talk about sophisticated transportation, maybe to the moon. But here we are talking about maybe the rickshaw guys, right? There's a whole network of it. How about healthcare? When communicable diseases are spreading, how does one really communicate to the masses quickly? So one of the aspects of the next billion is really about livelihood, right? How does the net play a role? So we think that there's going to be lots of new requirements, lots of new thinking, new breakthrough to serve this next billion. So the debate is not about more technology, more sophistication. We think that it is, well, in fact, it might even be more technologies that's needed to really solve the next billion. They belong to different strata of society in the current definition of our development in here, but they have requirements that I think are a lot more real, and in some sense, as what you guys like to say, we must get real. So what is this issue? Most of the billion, the normal dominant place of work is probably not in the office or at home. It is out there. So one key element is that the net must be accessible everywhere. More importantly, many of them are probably not literal in the way that we understand, text form, but they are very knowledgeable in their own ways. So we must find a way to embrace a lot more people and many more ways of interacting. I think Apple has done a great job by showing how haptic, the touch and feel can really become a user interface. I think voice will be necessary. So in other words, the next web will have to embrace to be much more larger, to encompass many more spaces, to encompass many more people, to really be able to accept different forms of interaction. So in many ways, the net will have to be able to take in the physical happening, the physical events of the world, and virtualize it. And similarly, the internet itself, the world that we know, has to be much more real. And together, in some sense, I think the technology breakthrough is really how we can become more seamless in this continuum of cyber-physical in order to better serve the next billion. So you may say, oh God, that sounds complex. Well, it is not as far-fetched. If you look at it today, right, the web is increasingly being the world. The web cameras, the microphones are like our ears and eyes, and increasingly the iPhone, the location stuff, the sensors and location stuff are actually being formed part of being able to tell us where we are and what we can do with it. So I think this continuum, this ability to manage from physical to cyber is going to be the next big challenge for the net. So what can we do to really speed up this process to help in this evolution? Well, one of the things that we've been thinking about is really that we think we need to direct the flow of innovation and R&D towards the challenges of the next billion. I mean, we talk about lots of problem solving in many other spheres, but we have perhaps not as focused as much of our innovation capacity as well as R&D in addressing this next billion. So the last couple of years in Singapore, we have been putting our thinking cap, and the next second half of the presentation, I'd like to share with you some of the ideas that we have been working on. And we think that Singapore can play a key enabler for this next web, because it will require the best of the West technology, the best of the West processes, combined with the sensibility, the understanding of the East, and I think we are uniquely positioned. So one of the things that we've been doing is this. We have been actually, we think that the innovation is going to come out from the grassroots. So what we've been doing is funding thousands of projects. Like we give kids $50,000 each, and the youngest one is actually 14 years old, by the way. And when we say kids, the oldest is 60 years old. We give them $50,000 and ask them to innovate, and when they have a great idea on ideas on this nature. So the last couple of years, the last 2-3 years, we've funded about 200 over projects. These are the projects. For example, one of them called Mozart. It's interesting, it's a very simple solution. It actually built a little software that today, right, on more than 300 to 400 telephone models, not smartphone, just a normal phone, and it makes the phone a social media device. It is being used in some 200 countries. That's what we need, right? Something simple, something that rides on existing infrastructure that solves the immediate needs of the population. So we have been fueling up our capacity to innovate at the grassroots. The other thing that we think is very important is that this challenge might require us to marshal the best that we have around the world, the best that R&D that is happening around the world to be really focused on this challenge. So what we've been doing is this. We think that this problem cannot be solved by engineers or technologists. We need the social scientists, we need the creative folks, we need the businesses to come together. So we've been funding projects requiring them, they are cross-discipline. In other words, they must combine various aspects. One of the most exciting things we've been doing is that we have been able, and I think John Seeley Brown is in the crowd, to pool, get the like-minded people, get the like-minded passion to come together. So we have been going around the world creating joint research centers. So for example, the one with Chinese Academy of Sciences, CAS out there, they are mission-driven type of R&D. The challenge for them was this: help mediate 100 million Chinese to communicate with non-Chinese. Well, the instinct was translation. Yes, you need translation, but translation will never be able to give you the context of what the communication is about. So what they've been exploring is really facial recognition and virtual world to provide the complementary capabilities in order for us to communicate. The research center at IIT Bombay, for those who are very familiar, IIT is probably the premier school in India, of the institution. What we have been looking at is how do we empower hundreds of millions of people in the use of social media for the informal networks, the one that we talk about, whether it is microfinancing, whether it is a rickshaw network. How do we empower? How do we find new applications that will actually meet them? Well, we all know Japan is a wonderful gadgetry country. We have a great center that we're working on with Keio University. It's probably one of the best private universities. And they're working on how do we engage the other sensory part of our body to be able to support family relationship. And one of the areas they've been exploring is something that we probably don't think much of it, is something called the food. So let me just share with you a clip of what they've been doing in this food media.
With a rising elderly population, the problem of loneliness is a growing concern. Therefore, we introduce food media, an integrated system based around the common bonds between all generations, food and eating. Through the co-cooking system, people can prepare meals together at remote locations. The lid can sense the food temperature, density, and color, communicating these measurements to remote locations through a web interface. The spatula can sense the stirring angle and speed using accelerometers and gyroscopes. This movement can be replicated in a remote location, providing the user with haptic feedback. The haptic forces are generated using rotational motors in the spatula, producing a physical connection between users, reinforcing a sense of physical presence. The system stresses the importance of an active learning. It also simulates our childhood memory of grandma holding your hand as you learn to cook for the first time.
Well, they even make a food printer. For those who are interested, we'll talk about that. It's quite exciting. You can actually print in food. Well, let me move on a bit. The other idea that we have been working on is really make Singapore. We are very small, right? The whole Singapore as a test bed for the next billion. Right? We think we're a great place for innovation and breakthrough to take place. So what are we doing there? Well, first and foremost, I think what we are doing is really to add in open up, to make open access to the network, the sensor and actuator, make it available, make it easy for people to be able to experiment on, let's say, 1 million sensor and actuators. And the next thing that we think we need to put in place is really a rich data set, a real-time data set, because that's what we're dealing with. And what this data set, they include language corpus, maybe your location, and very localized information. If we can make this data set available, then innovation, I think, would be much easier to take place, because the barrier for really experimenting is much higher out in our part of the world. But most importantly, I think, is the context in which this set of services need to be delivered. Many a time we think it's a technology problem, but many a time it's really the social political context in which a service is allowed to deliver. Take, for example, the Google exploration with China. I think that's a wonderful example of social political context in which they need to take into consideration. Now, making access the user, making access the businesses and the services so that innovation can take place. So we think that Singapore might be a great place, and we are putting in our effort to really create this environment in which the world can come together and hopefully experiment and create breakthroughs for the next billion. So I'm going to draw to a conclusion. And really, my key point here is that there's going to be a next billion, and if what we think is right, the next billion is likely going to come out from Asia. They will demand that the net help them solve their livelihood challenges, and that means embracing the physical event and happening of their lives. And I know that I'm probably too complex about this physical cyber continuum. I'm going to end out with a little clip that's also done by the Keio University. Actually, this is actually a prototype that is done and is waiting for commercialization. And it might explain better what I meant by the cyber physical continuum.
Back in Japan, cybertech is the wave of the present as much as the future. Dr. Adrian Cheok is working on a pocket-sized approach to communication, the social robot. It's a clever, child-friendly technology. Nowadays, kids are exploring cyberspace before they can tie their shoes. It's a great way for them to connect and learn, but it also means they need to be protected. Social robots offer a safe way for kids to communicate in life and online. This little pink apple is called Petimo. Here's how it works. The toy is actually a small handheld computer with Wi-Fi and RFID radios. The screen can project icons or display simple games. When two Petimos kiss, their RFID radios exchange details. A Wi-Fi radio then notifies a grown-up's computer that their kid's Petimos made a new friend. Just for fun, the pink pals are also haptic, vibrating when you squeeze them. Instead of meeting unknown avatars online, you network with people in the real world, swap information, and voila! Your 3D avatars can now play together in the world of a popular Japanese tradition called kawaii, or cute culture. Their new friendship, sealed with a kiss.
Thank you for the opportunity. I hope to have the opportunity to meet with you either physically or in the cyber world. Thank you very much.